so how do you decide what is the good? Because right now you're essentially playing Cotty under the tree, right? You get to sit there and say, here's a good moral standard, here's a bad moral standard, and you and I will sit here and our conversation will be better than a conversation 1,000 years ago. Mm. There's a question that I asked you actually last time we spoke publicly, and the question is, okay, so if that's the case, you and I tend to agree, I would think, on probably 95% of our central values about what it is that makes for a good life. Right. I think that we both believe in individual freedoms. I think we both believe in the ability to live as you choose, so long as you're not hitting anybody else in the face, as a general rule. I think that we both agree on all of these things. And so what I asked you last time is, why do we agree on these things? Is it because we just both happen to be super reasonable? Like we are just the most reasonable people who ever lived, and we just happen to be here at this time, and why didn't people 1,000 years ago know this? Or is it, back to my original argument, the fact that we grew up probably 10 miles from each other in a city that was built in a country that was built by people who believed all of these things that came from a book, half of which you think is crap, from from 1,000 years before Christ?
Well, so I think the environment in which we grew up, insofar as this is a product of culture, is not mostly defined by the Judeo-Christian tradition. It's mostly defined by secular politics and secular ethics that have, some of which are of a piece with those religions and other religions. Something like the Golden Rule. I mean, the Golden Rule predates Christianity, certainly. It's in Leviticus, I think. And
I love thy neighbor as thyself, in Leviticus.
Yeah, and but it's not unique there too. I mean, there are Greek philosophers. I think Epictetus articulated it someplace. The truth is, it predates our humanity on some basic level. You can see evidence of it in monkeys, right? There's an expectation of fairness even in monkeys, right? So this is we're running a software program that is morally relevant to us, that is riddled with bugs, but that predates our humanity. And so largely what civilization is, what the good parts of culture that will lead to something that is durable at the level of civilization, largely correct for our merely hominid, merely evolved, merely creaturely moral intuition. So for instance, like you and I have as front and center in our moral hardware a sense of disgust, right? And disgust has roots below anything that could be considered moral. It's just, you could smell something bad and you feel like vomiting, and that's but the truth is, in terms of the evolution of the brain doesn't evolve new modules that can do fundamentally new things. It has to evolve capacities that are predicated on the old hardware that was anchored to things like, I'm going to vomit based on that smell, right? And much of our moral thinking about the world is disgust-based or fear-based, and it gets applied to things like how you feel about gay marriage, say. So if you go into a Bible-thumping fundamentalist Christian context where you can find people who are just adamant that gay marriage is wrong, this disgust circuitry is tuned up through the lens of that social question. And so I view conversation about ethical truth and progress in ethical space being more a matter of reasoning and unhooking our reflexive, in this case, disgust-based intuitions from our sense of what is ultimately good. I mean, there are things that you and I might not be comfortable with the first time we consider them, that we can get comfortable with by thinking it through or imagining things from other people's perspectives.
Or at the very least that we think are immoral but still think that we have no business in doing anything about. Right?
Yeah, and ultimately, there are cases of kind of moral dumbfounding where you would have to admit that it's moral in the sense that you can't point to a victim, right? And
yet, Jonathan Haidt talks about experiments like this, like somebody who's having sex with a dead chicken.
But it still disgusts you. I mean, to take it out of the moral sphere for a second, if I told you, well, I have Jeffrey Dahmer's sweater, it's been dry cleaned. Would you try it on? Right? Now, everyone recoils from that, right? But it's not, if you actually think about it, it's not something that, there's kind of a magical superstition intruding there where you think that it's something that's been deposited in the sweater, even though we dry cleaned it 450 times, right? So it's and if maybe a sweater is too charged, but to take something where there would be absolutely no question that
Hitler's
his DNA,
harmonica.
it's not covered with this creepy guy's DNA. It's something that you just, in order to recoil from it, you are thinking superstitiously, right? So you can correct for those.
So you're making a sociobiological explanation for morality, like basically it's an E.O. Wilson explanation for the evolution of morality?
No, so to the contrary, I think that there are two very different ways to talk about morality with respect to our scientific understanding of ourselves. One is what you just referenced, this biological, evolutionary, descriptive story of how we got here. Why is it that we're the sort of apes that feel these sorts of ways about social interactions, say, right? And why is our moral thinking anchored to those properties? Then there's a completely separate question, which is the question that interests me morally, which is, given what we are, given where we are right now, what is possible for us? How good could human life be? And what are the principles of neurobiology and everything else, economics and sociology and genetics, anything that can be brought to bear to change human experience? What are the principles whereby we can navigate in the space of all possible experience and experience better and better lives and a better and better world? And so that is a very different question, because it presupposes, just on its face, that we have to, most of our job is to fly the perch that has been prepared to us.
Right, and I think you and I agree